Hi everybody, my name is Savannah Echegoyen. Okay, so this semester I learned that qualities or quirks that I simply attributed to my personality could actually be considered strengths. So my top 5 strengths were input, adaptability, woo, communication, and ideation. And I believe that each of these strengths are going to impact my classroom and the way I'll approach teaching, but specifically, I'm going to focus on input, communication, and ideation for this presentation. So, the one thing that I have always been passionate about are the arts. I think it's pretty cool when you think about how all of the creativity of mankind and all the expression of human imagination comes out as art. All the branches of arts like painting, sculpting, music, literature, dance, drama, photography. There's so many more. So on that note, my strength in input comes from my love of literature. And I think so many people nowadays don't like to read, and that's probably because they never really read as a child. Growing up, people around me made sure to express that reading was a treat. My mother used to read to me as a kid as a reward. And our class, we were able to go to the library for story time if we had been good that day. My teacher would let us go make up a story, allowing us to create something, using our own imagination and read it out loud to the class, but only if we had been on our best behavior that day. And we were allowed to go to book fairs, but only if we'd finished all our work. So I specifically remember my second grade teacher, Mr. Robinson, reading a book series to the class called Wayside Stories Falling Down, which is a book about a class that attended a school called Wayside Story, and it was just about all the shenanigans that they would get into. But instead of using the characters' names from the books, he would use the names of kids in our classroom. And it was really fun to just imagine the kids from our class getting into those kinds of adventures. But Mr. Robinson would never pick your name if you'd been misbehaving that day. So we were taught that reading could be fun, and they made it special. And I want to have my students feel the same way about reading. I want to try to instill that love of literature in them while they're still young. I recently read a quote by George R.R. Martin, who is the author of a little book series called Game of Thrones. And if you didn't know that Game of Thrones was originally a book series, well then, shame. Anyway, the quote said, "A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies, but the man who never reads lives only one." And I just love that. So my strength in communication, I think, will help me in my classroom by making sure that my students feel at ease. I want my students to feel comfortable enough to make comments and to engage in discussions, and I want to be able to help them with their vocabulary and how to choose words that will give more power and clarity to their meaning. So lastly, I know that many schools are cutting programs in the arts, but as a teacher, I want to take the approach of using the arts to complement other subjects. And that's where I think my strength in ideation will help me to teach. I like to figure out how things are interrelated, and because of my strength in ideation, I usually find different ways of doing things. I have a natural inclination to invent innovative and unusual ways of performing tasks because I get bored when I have to follow the same series of steps day in and day out, and I feel like sometimes teaching can be that way. I think individually, mathematics, science, and history are only a small part of the reality in this world. But I also don't think that the arts alone are sufficient enough either. So I feel that both are important and are needed to give students a more complete and comprehensive education. For example, if I were teaching my students about the Grand Canyon, I could give them a verbal description of the Grand Canyon using a number of measurements. But wouldn't a painting or a picture, be better at displaying the grandeur of the canyon? I mean, both are valid ways, and both ways contribute to understanding. But if you ask them to do some sort of creative writing assignment about the Grand Canyon, then you'll see what sort of impression the Grand Canyon made on them. When we involve students in creative problem solving, then we invite them to participate in their own learning process. Instead of just giving them facts and telling them what to think, the arts engage the minds of the students to sort out their own reactions. And that's the type of classroom I strive to have. I want my walls to be covered with my students' own renditions of Van Gogh's Starry Night, and I want them to know music from all over the world and from different eras, and I want to focus on creating an area where they feel comfortable being creative learners. So thanks for listening, everyone, and I hope that everyone had a great semester. Bye.